one of what I think is the best arguments against the existence of a God is that we have no evidence whatsoever that any kind of consciousness can exist apart from a physical brain.
Good morning, Bezel 333. A little froggy this morning, so I'm going to keep it low. I received a message from a subscriber apparently unimpressed by the choice of atheist-related videos I've done, who asked me why I have not responded to any of Matt Dillahunty's videos. I told him the simple reason was I'd never heard of him. But as I'm always looking for interesting topics to discuss, I looked him up. And come to find out, he is an ex-fundamental Baptist, almost a pastor atheist, the kind of background that produces the most passionate kind of atheist, and in Matt's case, one who knows the facts of the Bible better than most Christians. He's the host of what's called the Atheist Experience, a cable show out of Austin, Texas. And in this video, he appears with co-host Jeff D. Here, Matt and Jeff are taking a caller's question regarding the idea of the human soul and the reality of an afterlife. Now, let's get something out of the way first and foremost. Many of the documents that make up the Bible, although written by various human authors over a long time span in various places, whether or not they are actually God-inspired, are at the very least historical documents. And yes, there are terrible, albeit they isolated stories of rape, incest, slavery, and God-sanctioned killing of men, women, and even children to be found there. And yet, I'm willing to believe in the God revealed in those accounts because Jesus of Nazareth, who really lived and died in human history and was reported by many eyewitnesses to have been raised from the dead, believed it and quoted from it. Some of these eyewitnesses, and those who got their information from these eyewitnesses, went on to compose what we now call the New Testament. And you may not like the idea, but the Bible is a collection of books, including historical documents. And although it's not empirical evidence, it is evidence nonetheless.
The point of my call is, from a physics standpoint, I know that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And if we have some sort of energy like that in our bodies, energy like that can only be transferred. So would that be sort of like maybe a quote-unquote afterlife or something?
So the question is there something of you or me apart from our bodies that continues on after the moment of death? Well, here's Jeff's response.
What's your definition of life? I mean, if it's the biological processes that make your body able to, remain animate, then no, because once your body's not doing that anymore, then you don't have life.
Now that's a good question. My definition of human life is the qualities that make up a functional personal being as opposed to a non-functional personal being, in other words, a dead body. And when I say functional, I mean not only the biological processes that come from the brain firing neurons so that the body can breathe and digest food and so forth, but also the non-biological functionality like volition, rationality and intellect, emotions, creativity, compassion, and desire. Now, I call those aspects of the human life non-biological because they cannot be empirically measured, nor can they be studied in the way a scientist, let's say, could study a brain post-mortem.
There's a lot of confusion when people start tossing around the word energy because all of this New Age crap tends to toss around the word energy because it's prone to being used for equivocation. Yeah. There's energy and matter. So what? It's like, does a battery have an afterlife once we've drained it?
New Age crap indeed. Now there we can agree wholeheartedly, Matt. However, your battery analogy is not entirely correct. Now from your point of view, the human life is like a AA Duracell battery. You use it until there's no power left and then you toss it out. But from the Bible's point of view, the human life is more like an aircraft NICAD battery. See, once it becomes used for a while, you actually need to discharge it down to a complete kind of battery deadness in order to properly bring it back and restore it to a new condition.
The thing, what Jeff was pointing about, how you define life, nothing about who I am, or everything about who I am, I guess, is, as far as I can tell, the product of my brain, which is, yeah, there's energy there, but there's no identifiable mechanism for after I'm dead and my body begins to decay and the whatever energy there was, dissipates, etc., that this represents me in any sense, any more than, once we've drained the battery, it has an afterlife.
Well, that's just it, Matt. As far as you can tell, it's only your brain. And that is one way of looking at it. However, Jesus had a particular way of looking at who you are as well. Jesus taught that you are composed of a unity of material body and immaterial soul or spirit. In Matthew 10:28, Jesus said, "Don't fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Or in Mark 14:38, "Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." You see, for Jesus, you are much more than just your brain.
One of what I think is the best arguments against the existence of a God is that we have no evidence whatsoever that any kind of consciousness can exist apart from a physical brain. Mm-hmm. And that you'll find a lot of people who believe in gods also believe in ghosts and spooks and demons and afterlives and whatnot, because that once you take that on board, sure, I mean, you could have all kinds of people floating around without any bodies, but there is no evidence whatsoever that there's any such thing.
Well, I'll say it again, Jeff. Like it or not, the biblical documents, especially the 4 Gospels in the New Testament, do in fact represent evidence. It's eyewitness testimony, which seems to suffice quite well in the area of forensics. And the eyewitness testimony is that a man was really executed and was really dead, and 3 days later was seen alive by multiple individuals. He was walking and talking and eating fish. This man, Jesus of Nazareth, claims that there is a soul that lives on after a person dies. Jesus said things like, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake will save it," or find it. Or, "For what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and ends up forfeiting his very soul?" Now, if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then whatever. But if he really did, and there are many good reasons to believe that, then you really need to reconsider your assumption that your life is simply your brain.
Yeah, I think the thing that it kind of, that bothers me is, I'm alive and conscious and I'm doing things, and then, I know that one day I will die, and that, I've been told and believe that, if there's nothing, it's just nothing after that, like you don't be reincarnated or whatever you want to, say happens to you. Just like if there's just nothing, that's just unacceptable to me, and that's kind of scary in a way.
The caller's concerns are reasonable because human life itself, as we said before, is functional. So to no longer exist and no way of continuing our personal functionality flies in the face of who we are as humans. If there's nothing after the moment of death, and you and I cease to exist, then the only alternative is not to die, or to put it off as long as possible. And this is Jeff's only advice.
If you're concerned about living a good, long, healthy life, then the thing to do is to support research into life extension, right? Into medical technology and human life extension.
I work for an 88-year-old billionaire who has attained great power and influence, owns much property and many businesses. His primary purpose in life is to make more money, build more buildings, and have more power. He's not a religious man, and he knows he's going to die, so he has decided he's not going to die. He eats a virtual vegan diet, exercises regularly, and sees only the best doctors. He wants to make it to 125. Now, let's say he does. Then what? Well, if he doesn't die before that, and I'm betting he probably will, he's still going to die. Now, Jesus told a parable about a guy like this. It's found in Luke 12. He said, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I'll do this. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I will store my grains and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul will be required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? so is the one who lays up treasures for himself on earth and is not rich towards God. Now, if you think the words of Jesus are just fairy tales, a common accusation among atheists, then fine, write off what he says and instead sign up with a cryogenic research company that will sever the head off your dead corpse and preserve it in a steel tank filled with liquid nitrogen and hope that one day your savior, called science, can figure out a way to reanimate you. Or you can examine the historical evidence for the existence of Jesus of Nazareth and the reliability of the New Testament documents and reconsider your long-term strategy.
There are scientists who actually study near-death experience phenomena. And while we don't completely understand it, there's no reason to think that it's not just a dying brain, a malfunctioning, oxygen-deprived brain dying.
Now, I agree with Matt here. Near-death experiences are just that, near death and not death. The writer of the Hebrews puts it this way: it is appointed for man once to die, and after this comes judgment, so that Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him.
Fine. The question still is there any evidence that your consciousness could exist without your body? And, well, there isn't.
Yeah, empirical evidence that you can examine in a test tube. No, Jeff is right, there is none. However, the Bible, if indeed God's inspired word written by men, which Jesus himself believed and trusted it to be, should be taken seriously. Remember that Jesus himself was convinced that death was not the end, as evidenced by his words to one of the two criminals crucified beside him. He said, "Assuredly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." And the Apostle Paul echoes this idea in his second letter to the Corinthians when he writes, "Yes, we are of good courage, that we would rather be away from the body and be at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him."
I read somewhere on the internet, like I said, I don't know if it's a really reliable source, but they said that they actually, weighed somebody, an actual person, before death and after death, and they said that, there was a big weight difference, on the energy or something.
Yeah, it's just not true.
And that made me think,
energy doesn't have weight.
Yeah.
So right there's that's a big question mark.
It's the movie 7 Grams was titled after this. This is an old kind of urban legend thing that they claimed, it's the weight of the soul. And the fact is that the original experiments that this was based on were just inaccurate.
Now, the movie was actually called 21 Grams, but I totally agree with Matt and Jeff that 21 or 7 grams is not the weight of the soul. The soul is the immaterial aspect of the human constitution, and thus it does not have weight, nor does it reside in a particular part or cavity of the body. Okay, guys, I can't in any way concretely prove that after a person dies, they continue to exist in a continuous, conscious, and personal form of existence apart from their body. And lacking this concrete empirical proof of an afterlife, you choose to go in the opposite direction and talk as if you have some kind of proof that there isn't one. That's not surprising, assuming you'd much rather welcome the prospect of immediate non-existence than a life after death standing before the God who made you to be judged by him. I realize you're not presently worried this might happen, but I will say this one more time. The New Testament claim is that a 33-year-old Jewish carpenter turned itinerant preacher from a backwater town in ancient Palestine was crucified by the Romans at the insistence of the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem. The claim further states that this man Jesus was seen alive by multiple eyewitnesses 3 days later. The small group of fishermen and other nobodies who followed him were, by his appearances to them, transformed from weak, frightened, and helpless people into passionate, bold, and relentless people in their commission to let others know about their resurrected Savior. The gospel of Jesus is an objective truth claim. Either it happened or it didn't. If it is true, and I think there's good reason to think it is, then what Jesus taught about an afterlife is also true.